My husband 30 male cheated on me with my best friend 30 female. My husband 30M had an affair with a female 30F who was meant to be my closest friend. Her husband was a groomsman, and their children were a ring bearer and flower girl. My spouse and I have been married for 1.5 years and have been together for 8 years. So, the affair began a year ago, and I discovered it instantly. They were extremely comfortable with each other and caressing in a manner that I wasn't happy with, right in front of my face, and chatting much too much on Snapchat. They denied it, and I believed them. She brought up my previous relationship, in which I had been cheated on, and promised that she would never make me feel that way again. They continued to work out and hang out while her husband and I were both at work. We had no idea. Since COVID, my husband has generally worked from home, and she only works a couple of days a week. When it all began, I was 3 months pregnant with his kid. I was in a pretty bad position, having had an extremely bad first trimester. I was literally depressed. I allowed things like housekeeping and paying attention to my spouse go, and it became a problem. I had no idea he was struggling as well. I wasn't the friend she needed either. I kept her and everyone else at bay. This includes my family. I wanted to be alone. I wasn't feeling well. They exchanged glances. They started an emotional affair and kept it hidden from her husband and myself for months. She would guilt me into going out with her, and he pretended that everything was normal between us. I began to suspect something was going on again a few months after the first time I had concerns. She maintained a fitness notebook in my husband's and my barn where they exercised. I had no idea they were working out together at the time. I decided to have a look at it one day. They were dated, and it was full of private song lyrics to each other. "I love you," one of them said. It was written in both my husband's and hers handwriting. At the time, I was 5 months pregnant and devastated. We believed we put an end to it. They also swore it was just emotional and not bodily. They texted and spoke on the phone all day. Then they'd remove everything. They'd come over to my place and hang around for who knows how long. A few days later, my husband and I started therapy, where I actually just found out he was lying all during counseling too. We went to therapy for 3 months before our kid was born. My spouse was completely distant throughout the delivery, and it broke my heart. I struggled with being around him on a daily basis after that. I hadn't forgiven him yet, and I hadn't even started to mend. A few months later, I addressed him about additional concerns I was dealing with, as well as the fact that I wanted to speak about it all again. This was the first time he showed regret for what he had done and confessed he had made a mistake. 6 months after the previous time I captured them, I immediately felt better. I'd already forgiven him. I'd heard all I needed to hear. I no longer disliked being around him and began to love spending time with him again. Let's fast forward 2 weeks. I was driving out of town when my phone began to ring, and it was the girl's husband on the other end. He phoned to say he had caught them together that morning, just after I had gone. As I went with our kid for the day, my husband kissed me goodbye and told me he loved me. He was dead bent on divorce since I had indicated I was done. What more could I say at that point? He was so adamant on divorce that I couldn't believe he wanted it when he was the cheater. I begged him many times to tell me the truth and that it was physical. He was continuously saying no. It was merely an emotional reaction. He cared for her but wasn't in love with her. We were on the phone one day that week as he was driving home from work. He informed me that work had called and that he had to go. Then he arrived home 20 minutes later than usual. He wasn't feeling well when he came home. He was zoning out and sobbing. He refused to speak to me. I knew it had to do with her. I had a feeling he'd been with her. I asked him whether he was disappointed that she had chosen to repair her marriage. He certainly was. He expressed his happiness for her, but I know him better than he believes. I consoled him at the death of his lover. That broke my heart. No woman should have to console her husband after a breakup with another woman while he is married to her. I discovered a message he had wrote to her on his iPad in his notes 2 days earlier. It was read by me. It shattered me even more. He repeatedly called her sweet darling and assured her he loved her. He hoped he could prove it to her on a regular basis. It was published 3 weeks ago. I went up to him. Again, he pretended to be stupid. I questioned him once again whether it was physical. He replied no and vowed on my life it wasn't physical. I had to leave the following day to go to work. I called the girl's husband to check if he was available that day, and he was. We ended up conversing for much too long, and he told me the news they've been keeping from me from the beginning a year ago. With this new knowledge, I faced my spouse. He told a falsehood. Over and over. They were imagining things. Attempting to make my life miserable. I contacted the lady yesterday morning and asked if I could chat to her. We met soon after. She opened up to me about everything. For a year, they had been sleeping together. At my house. I'm in my bed. She met my kid before. She'd been in his presence 4 times. They just stopped talking to each other for approximately a month. They used to converse every 2 weeks, but a month after our son was born, they began chatting every day. That happened 6 months ago. Remember how I claimed we had it worked out 5 months ago? Were already resuming their romance. When things eventually improved for me, and he broke down and apologized for what he had done, he was already doing it again. It had no meaning. Since I returned to work in August, they've been sneaking about together. They text, converse on the phone, and then erase everything. They knew each other's phone numbers, so it didn't matter if they weren't stored. They communicated on Reddit, where her husband and I would never see it. They were having a good time in my bed. My house, which was intended to be a secure and pleasant haven for me, is no more. I'm not looking forward to being in this home. Oh, and she also revealed to me that she began this to harm me. She wanted to harm me in the same way that I had harmed her. When I was at my lowest, I pushed her away, like I pushed everyone away. She began having affairs with my husband. That is not the same thing. What did I do to deserve that? I informed my spouse that I had met with her and that she had informed me of everything. This was the first time he wanted to speak about anything at that time. All of his falsehoods from the previous year had now caught up with him. He ultimately admitted it since he didn't have an option. He told me almost everything, but there are still certain questions I have that he won't answer. They've had in 3 of our house's rooms. I despise it here. I'm ready to leave this home. But how exactly? It isn't possible. I'm not going to tell anybody. Not even my closest family members or pals. I am shattered. I'm on my own. I feel like such a squandering of space. But I'll keep fighting as hard as I can for my kid. We've spoken about therapy again, and he's still on the fence. He seems to be interested in repairing things, or at least attempting to do so, but then begins throwing the term divorce about like it's nothing. It bothers me every time. He informed me that she had previously done this. Twice successfully, and once with another mutual buddy. He wasn't going to fall for her ruse. My spouse is the only man she has ever slept with. She says she loves him but wants to save her marriage. She recently told my husband that she wants to quit her marriage for him. She is no longer the same person she was 2 weeks ago. I can't believe my spouse continues to fall into her trap despite knowing she'd done it before. How did he believe he'd be any different? How did none of this seem to be wrong? Is it true that I'm such a lousy wife? How can I break out of this rut? I want to mend our relationship. I still have feelings for him. I want our youngster to have a memory of us all together as a family. I don't want another woman, particularly her, to assist raise my kid. Is it wrong for me to want to stay? Is it weak of me to want to attempt to mend what has been broken? Aside from that, I feel like our marriage is a farce and a one-man show. It's a forgery. On our wedding day, he informed me he wasn't pleased. He didn't feel loved or cared for at the time. So, why should you get married? I'll be eternally thankful since it gave us our son, but it doesn't make it any easier. I'm a terrible wife. I make a lot of mistakes. I'm not clean enough, I'm not career-oriented enough, and I don't contribute enough. I've spent the past year listening to everyone tell me how much better I could and should be doing. I'm not up to the task. There are so many more minor things that go into all of this that they no longer seem so small. Just a few things he's told me. If I worked out, he'd be more interested in me. But he never mentioned the fact that I had shed 40 pounds. He doesn't show any love towards me. He always claimed that he wasn't very affectionate. However, he has shown her devotion. What should I do? How can I break out of this rut? How can I regain my faith in him? He claims I also violated his confidence by snooping on his iPad. I don't have someone to speak to. I don't want anybody else to find out. Just yet. I don't want him to be despised by my family and friends. I'm on my own. I'm seeking for encouraging tales from folks who have gone through similar experiences. I need hope. Please abstain from being negative. That's enough of a problem for me right now. I'm sure I've forgotten something. It's been a long and difficult year. Much has occurred. I am grateful for my baby guy.